The Middle East is entering one of those rare moments when history loosens its grip. Iran is weaker than it has been in decades. Its reach is strained, its deterrence questioned. And whenever a power fades, something dangerous follows behind it, a vacuum. The real question is not whether Iran is declining. It is who steps forward next. Today, all eyes quietly turn to one man, Mohammed bin Salman, not because he is loud, but because he is recalibrating alliances, rivals, assumptions all at once. From Yemen to Turkey, from Washington to Beijing, from dependency to hedging, some in Washington see a partner drifting. Others see a strategist adapting to a world that no longer guarantees protection. If you want to understand where this region is going, you have to stop looking at Iran alone and start watching Saudi Arabia's next move. Stay with me, because to grasp what is unfolding now, we first need to understand the rivalry that shaped the region for nearly half a century. To understand this moment, we need to be precise about what is actually changing and what is not. For decades, the Middle East revolved around a single axis of competition. Saudi Arabia and Iran, two powers vying for influence across the Muslim world since 1979. That rivalry defined wars, proxies, and alliances. But today, the balance inside that equation is shifting. Iran's weakening has not produced peace. It has produced uncertainty, and uncertainty forces choices. Mohammed bin Salman is not reacting emotionally. He is recalibrating structurally, consolidating power at home, rethinking dependence abroad, expanding Saudi Arabia's room to maneuver in a region where guarantees have repeatedly failed. This is why Saudi outreach now stretches in multiple directions at once toward former rivals, toward new defense arrangements, toward partners beyond Washington, not out of ideology, but out of calculation. The debate, especially in the United States, is whether this recalibration stabilizes the region or quietly redraws it. To answer that, we have to go backward before we can move forward. To see why this recalibration feels so unsettling, we have to step back into the long arc of history. Since Iran's 1979 revolution, the Middle East has operated on a grim cycle. Power expands, power provokes, power is contained until it isn't. Saudi Arabia and Iran became the two poles of that cycle, competing not through direct war, but through proxies, ideology, and influence across fragile states. For decades, Saudi's strategy was predictable. It relied on U.S. security guarantees to counter Iran's reach. In return, Riyadh anchored a regional order aligned with Washington. That bargain held imperfectly, but it held. What changed was not just Iran. What changed was trust. Repeated attacks on Saudi territory. Reforms long encouraged by Washington, followed by public rebukes. Policy decisions that, from Riyadh's perspective, signaled hesitation when deterrence mattered most. When a system stops delivering security, rational actors do not protest forever. They adapt. Mohammed bin Salman's rise coincided with this realization. Power consolidated at home. Optionality expanded abroad. Dependency slowly gave way to hedging, and that shift sets the stage for the first real rupture. Because theory becomes reality in moments of crisis. The first rupture did not arrive with a speech or a treaty. It arrived through fire. Hundreds of drones, rockets crossing borders. Saudi territory hit again and again by the Houthis, Iran's proxy in Yemen. And from Riyadh's perspective, the response from Washington felt muted, procedural, distant. This is where frustration hardened into strategy. As one former U.S. official bluntly put it, those attacks were largely ignored. And then came the moment that crystallized everything, the removal of the Houthis' terror designation. In Saudi eyes, this was not a technical adjustment. It was a signal that the old guarantees were no longer guaranteed. That decision marked a turning point. Mohammed bin Salman drew a conclusion that many leaders reach quietly but rarely admit aloud. If Plan A no longer works, you build a Plan B. Outreach to Russia. Engagement with China. New defense conversations elsewhere, not as ideological shifts, but as leverage. If you're trying to understand Saudi behavior today, this is the hinge point. Everything after flows from here. And if this matters to how you see global power shifting, take a moment to stay engaged, because the most important dynamics are still hidden beneath the surface. What comes next is not chaos. It is a system revealing its logic. Saudi Arabia's current posture is often misread because observers look for ideology where there is none. What is actually operating is a cold mechanism: interests over alignment, flexibility over loyalty, stability over slogans. This is why outreach to Turkey matters, not as reconciliation theater, but as de-escalation by design. Rivals are expensive. Neutralized rivals are assets. Economic cooperation follows political cooling, not the other way around. It is also why accusations of ideological drift miss the point. Saudi policy is not pivoting toward Islamism. Its designation of the Muslim Brotherhood remains unchanged. What has changed is the willingness to tolerate ambiguity if it reduces fragmentation and limits Iran's leverage. This mechanism explains the apparent contradictions: hedging with China while signaling Washington, engaging rivals while confronting proxies, supporting unity where fragmentation benefits adversaries. When you see these moves as part of a single operating system, they stop looking erratic and start looking deliberate. But every system faces stress tests, and the next one is unfolding in real time, on the ground, where theories collide with blood and territory. The second crisis strips away all abstraction. This is where strategy meets reality. Yemen was supposed to be a shared front, a Saudi-Emirati alliance formed to roll back Iranian influence through the Houthis. The objective was clear, the enemy was clear, but over time, the unity fractured. Riyadh pushed for a single Yemeni state, arguing that fragmentation only empowers Tehran's proxy. The UAE chose a different path, backing southern separatists, prioritizing ports, corridors, and localized control. Same battlefield, different endgames. Now, that divergence has exploded into the open. In recent days, Saudi-backed Yemeni government forces have largely reclaimed southern and eastern Yemen from the UAE-supported Southern Transitional Council. The STC's leadership reportedly fled. The group itself appears to be dissolving. This is not a side story. It is a signal. To critics, this is proof that MBS is empowering dangerous actors and destabilizing partners. To defenders, it is the opposite: an attempt to prevent Yemen from becoming permanently broken, because broken states are Iran's favorite terrain. Either way, the message is unmistakable. Saudi Arabia is no longer outsourcing its core security logic, and that has consequences far beyond Yemen, because when strategies diverge, ordinary people feel it first. If all of this sounds distant strategies, alliances, power shifts, it isn't. It lands on people like you first, because when states recalibrate, it is ordinary lives that absorb the shock. In Yemen, fragmentation doesn't stay on a map. It becomes insecurity, stalled governance, and endless uncertainty. Every rival militia, every divided authority, every delayed settlement stretches suffering longer. From Riyadh's perspective, unity is not abstract. A fractured Yemen creates space for the Houthis, for al-Qaeda, for forces that thrive in chaos. But for people on the ground, every new offensive, every shift in backing, feels like another reset of hope. And beyond Yemen, you feel this instability indirectly through energy markets, regional tension, and a Middle East that never quite settles. When great powers hedge, prices move. When alliances strain, risks multiply. This is why debates over Saudi intent matter to you, even if you never follow Middle Eastern politics closely. Because stability is not theoretical. It shows up in whether crises spread or stop. If this analysis is helping you see the human cost behind the headlines, stay with me, because the consequences do not stop at regional borders. What is happening here does not remain confined to the Middle East. Power vacuums never do. As Iran weakens and Saudi Arabia asserts itself, the effects ripple outward into global alignments, energy security, and great power competition. When Riyadh hedges its partnerships, Washington feels it. When Saudi Arabia engages Turkey, Pakistan, Russia, or China, every capital recalculates. This is not a Saudi pivot away from the United States. It is leverage being rebuilt. For decades, American dominance structured the region. Today, multipolarity creeps in quietly. Saudi Arabia's message is subtle, but firm. Security cannot depend on a single external guarantor anymore. And once that logic takes hold, others follow. Turkey recognizes it. Pakistan responds to it. China and Russia exploit the opening. Even Europe adjusts, aware that Middle Eastern stability directly affects migration, energy prices, and inflation at home. The danger is not confrontation. The danger is misreading intent. If Washington interprets Saudi autonomy as defiance rather than adaptation, coordination erodes. And in geopolitics, misperception accelerates decline faster than any enemy. Which brings us to the question that matters most. What happens next if this trajectory continues? Looking forward, there are three paths this moment can take, and none of them are predetermined. The first is the stable adaptation scenario. Saudi Arabia successfully balances autonomy with partnership. It de-escalates regional rivalries, limits Iran's remaining leverage, and reassures Washington that independence does not mean abandonment. In this outcome, multipolarity is managed, not chaotic. Power adjusts without collapsing the system. The second is strategic drift. Hedging becomes misalignment. Coordination with allies weakens. Conflicting agendas in places like Yemen harden rather than resolve. No single decision causes rupture, but accumulated mistrust does. Stability erodes slowly, almost invisibly. The third is blowback. Fragmentation persists. Militias multiply. Proxy conflicts intensify. The very actors empowered to counter rivals today become threats tomorrow. History, as it often does, repeats its harsher lessons. Which path emerges depends less on ambition than on restraint. Power vacuums reward those who move but punish those who overreach. Systems endure not by dominance alone, but by coherence. And this is the unresolved tension at the heart of Mohammed bin Salman's moment. Can Saudi Arabia reshape the region without destabilizing it? That answer will not come from speeches. It will come from what happens next. We are watching a familiar story unfold, but with a different cast and higher stakes. When old orders weaken, new ambitions emerge. Iran's decline did not bring clarity. It exposed choice. And Mohammed bin Salman has chosen movement over paralysis, autonomy over dependence, recalibration over nostalgia. Whether that choice reinforces stability or strains alliances will define the next decade of the Middle East and reshape how power works in a world no longer anchored to a single center. For Washington, this is the test. Not of loyalty, but of adaptation. Partnerships survive when they evolve. They fracture when they demand obedience to a past that no longer exists. For the region, the lesson is sharper. Power vacuums do not wait. They are filled deliberately or disastrously. And for you, watching from the outside, this moment matters more than it seems. Because the future of energy, security, and global order is being negotiated not in grand declarations, but in quiet recalculations like this one. If you want to understand where the world is actually heading beyond headlines and slogans, stay with me. Share this analysis, and let's continue with what comes next.